it. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Master Your Mental podcast. I am super stoked right now to be getting into Master the Game today with my awesome guest, Dre Baldwin. Dre is an author of 29 books, a business coach, a professional speaker with 4 TED Talks, and a 9-year pro athlete. I met Dre in a great room on Clubhouse, all about the power of writing and publishing a book. So I was very excited when Dre reached out to share some of his knowledge, tips, and tricks with us today. So without further ado, welcome Dre to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here in Paris. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, of course. I'm super stoked to have you here as well. So before we go ahead and dive on into the conversation, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and what lights you up.
Sure. Well, my background is from the city of Philadelphia. Now I live in South Florida. Was always into sports. I got around to basketball around age 14. Wasn't really that good when I first started. Only played 1 year high school ball, but I walked on to play in college. Didn't set the world on fire in college either, but I still had this idea, this crazy idea that I could become a pro ball player. So after a year of working a couple quote unquote regular jobs, I was an assistant manager of Foot Locker. I worked at a gym called Bally Total Fitness. They're out of business now, not because of me. But and then I went to an exposure camp, which is basically like a job fair for athletes. I did pretty well there. I leveraged my performance there to sign with an agent. An agent is basically like in sports the same way they are in the literary world or the movie industry. They're the go-between between the job and the talent. So my agent got me my first job overseas. I was in Kaunas, Lithuania in 2005 to give everybody a time frame. I took the footage from that event because that footage was on this thing called a VHS tape. You remember VHS,
Oh yeah. Oh
Paris?
yeah.
Yeah. So I took that VHS tape and I got it onto a data CD and put it on. I took that footage and I put it on this brand new website I just heard about where you can put as much video up for free as you want it. It's called youtube.com. So that is kind of how I had 2 careers started at the same time. But this YouTube thing, I didn't know would be a thing because in 2005, there's no money for posting stuff on the internet. I don't know if Facebook was even out yet. We weren't using the phrases influencer, social media, or content at this time. So I'm playing ball overseas. I'm putting videos on YouTube sporadically, but I started to build a little audience. So people are watching these videos because I was just a guy who was showing people how to practice basketball, and it wasn't a thing that anybody else was doing. So I kind of became the source on that in that space. And then in 2009, I found myself without a job to play basketball. And I asked myself, well, how can I get some control over my career to where I can call my own shots? I can do something that I actually enjoy doing, which is playing ball. And I have some natural inclinations. I've always been a kind of a computer geek, even though I was an athlete. So I combine those 3 things and making money. So I combine those 3 things, natural skill, something I love doing, and making money. And that's where I started to focus more on what we now call personal branding or building my brand. But at the time, that wasn't a thing again. So I had a website, but it wasn't like a destination site at the time. So I started blogging more, just sharing more of my thoughts. I started talking about the mindset side of sports because a lot of athletes would ask me about that. And that's kind of what laid the foundation 10 years ago for what I do now, which is talk about the mental side of sports and how that mental side can translate over into everyday work and everyday life. So in
Wow.
2010, I started writing my first book. I'll end the story real quick. I wrote my first book
Yeah.
in 2010. I started talking about mindset more around that same period. And then it was in 2015 that I stopped playing professional ball and I just went full time into what I do now, which is writing books, coaching, speaking, basically sharing my intellectual property through
I
this whole
love
work on your
that.
game philosophy.
Wow. I love that so much. And honestly, what I can tell you is what I admire most about that is the fact that you just started. You did it, you started.
Right.
Because I feel like sometimes that is the hardest step in these things, right? So people are like, I want to write a book, right? Or I want to have a website. I want to launch my brand. I want to do a podcast. I want to do this. I want to start a YouTube channel, right? They have all these ideas and things and passions. But when you start that, you take those steps. And you said, like you said, back in 2005, you're putting these videos up there, you're showing people how to play the game, you're doing these things that you are passionate about, but then you're combining those 3 things that you love and to really to continue to build that into a brand. So I think that's incredible. I love that because, I feel like that's really like laying the foundation, like you talked about. You need to take these steps, right? And do these things because it is hard, right? And it can be scary. And I love how you focus on the mental aspect behind sports and also kind of getting into that conversation and like shifting that more into like the mindset aspects and like really talking about that. Cause I feel like that is something that 100%, needs to be touched on. And I love that you have really like dedicated yourself to doing that because we need that. We need that. So, I mean,
Yeah.
really, like, what I would love to ask you too is like, tell me about, the work on your game philosophies that you plan to share with us today. And like, kind of like, what are they? And like, how did you develop them? And how have they really helped you so far?
Sure. So when I was making these videos on YouTube, it was 100% just basketball stuff. I mean, literally on a basketball court doing drills and things like that, not like analysis. So these players would just see these videos, and I would always read and reply to my comments. I was always into that, engaging with my audience. So these players would ask me about my background because it's not like they knew me from TV. So they're like, "Who is this random guy who looks like he can play?" And he's teaching us, but I had never heard of this guy. So who is this guy? So they would find out about my background, how I didn't start playing until I was 14, or how I got cut from my high school team 3 times, or how I walked on in college, and now I'm playing overseas. So a lot of these players, they saw themselves in me because a lot of these players, they had got cut from their teams, and nobody believed that they could make it. But they see this guy who did, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. So they would just ask me about my background. And then when they saw me making these videos, again, way before this was a cool thing to do, they would ask me stuff like, Dre, why do you come to the gym every day and work out and put these videos out? Or when you play in the games, how do you have the same confidence in a game that you can have in practice? Because a lot of players would get performance anxiety. They would get the tryouts or a game, and it's not the same as practice when nobody's in the gym. So they wouldn't perform at the same level. Or they would ask, knowing my background, how'd you keep that idea alive that you could become a pro athlete after you got cut from your high school team 3 times? Because that is kind of far-fetched. Or they would ask how I got started getting known online, because by this point, I had a little bit of buzz to my name from these videos, and now it's starting to become a cool thing to put content on the internet. So I started answering these questions and laying the foundation for this philosophy that I didn't even know I was creating, Paris. So when people would ask me what keeps you showing up every day, I start talking about discipline. Or how do you show up in the game and perform when everybody's watching as opposed to when the gym is empty? I start talking confidence. Then, or when you're facing all these setbacks and things are not working in your favor, what keeps you coming back? What keeps you continuing to work on it? That led to mental toughness conversation. And then, how do you get started? Getting yourself known, or if you want to go play overseas, or you want to write a book, how do you even get started? That led to personal initiative. So these 4 principles: discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative. That became the foundation of what I now have now as a framework. It's called Work on Your Game. It's all about taking those tools that I use in sports, but then I realized when I started talking about them, I started to draw an audience of people, Paris, who were not ball players. And they would say, well, look, I don't watch the basketball drills that you do, but when you talk about mindset, I watch those videos because anybody can use that. So this told me, oh, I could serve the whole world with this. This is not just for people who play sports. So that's how I knew, even while I was still playing, what I was going to do when I was done playing. So that's where the Work on Your Game philosophy came from.
Wow. I mean, I really love that because, like you said, you're touching on a different audience, right? Instead of just people who are mainly focused in on the basketball videos, that kind of content, trying to consume that and like apply it to their life and their skills and
Right.
like try to leverage that. You ended up also impacting other people who are like, wow, like when he talks about these mindset things, that really interests me. That really makes me want to continue to engage and consume your content so that they can start to apply this. And I think that really goes to everything, right? Because when we sit here and like think about mindset, mindset is applied in every area of our life, right? Because the thought processing, the communication, like you said, all of these foundations that you have laid to create the framework for like what you teach your clients and all of that is just like everything right there. So I mean, I would love to get into the
Right.
conversation too on, your books as well, because that's a great accomplishment right there. Like 29 books. And you said your first book was, you said 2009, correct? 2009?
Yeah,
Was the
nine,
first
10, one of those.
2000, yeah,
Yeah,
2009 or 10. So I would love to kind of talk to you
yeah.
about that. So like how has the decision that you made to become an author, how has that impacted your life and also the lives of those who have read your books?
Man, it's a deep question. Nobody's ever asked me that one. So
I
I've
asked
always
those.
been, yeah, so I've always been into writing and reading. My mother herself is an educator. So, and I have a sister who's a year older than me. So she had us reading and writing early. So before we got to school, we already knew how to read and write. So I just kept that reading habit throughout my entire life. As long as I can remember, I've always been a reader. So because I read so often, when I saw the opportunity that I could publish my own writing through blogging, that was actually the first thing I did online was blogging, but that didn't catch fire. It was the YouTube that got me the attention, but I was blogging first. And when I saw that I can just express myself and just put it out there, then I just wanted to keep doing it. And then when I was playing overseas, I would just write these little entries, kind of like journal entries on Facebook. And just the people who I knew from Facebook were just reading them, and it was interesting to them because I'm halfway across the world playing basketball, so I'm living a life that they would never get to see. So they got to see it through my eyes, and people really liked my writing there. So then when I saw the opportunity to self-publish a book, because my first book was self-published, it was just me telling my story of when I first started playing ball, and that was targeted directly towards the people who were watching me on YouTube, the basketball players. And the book wasn't even that well written, honestly. When I went back to do the audiobook, I realized how many grammatical errors, and it wasn't even that good. But nobody complained about it because they were so bought into me as a person. So that's how I got into the writing. And these days, one of the things that I'm most proud of, Paris, is I get a lot of athletes, and I can say this because I'm an athlete. A lot of athletes don't read. A lot of athletes, they all they do is they just want to play their ball. They just want to play their sport, and they don't want to do anything else. But somebody like me, I've been able to kind of build a bridge for a lot of athletes because they look at me and they're like, all right, this guy, he looks like he comes from where I come from. He has the same sensibilities. He played ball, made it, quote unquote, in basketball. But he's writing books. Like, I don't read books, but I'll read his book. I'll read Dre's book just to see what he's talking about. And because I can speak to them on their level, they'll read that book, and then I'll say, well, you know what? You need to read Robert Greene. You need to go check out Napoleon Hill. You need to read this book by Tony Robbins. Read this book by Jim Collins. And then they'll go and read other books because they heard it from me, and it opens their mind up to another dimension of the world that they might not be paying attention to. So one of the things I've been most proud of that has made a lot of impact is opening up the minds of a lot of these, and mostly it's been the males, a lot of young men, mostly black guys, who wouldn't otherwise be reading books, but because they heard it from a guy who looks like them and sounds like them, they've been opening their minds to go read books. So that's been a great thing for me.
Wow, I love that so much because just the fact that you're able to touch these people in that way and make them, someone who does not read, who does not want to read, who does
Right.
not have any interest in that, and they see you and they're like, "Wow, this guy put this story together that interests me, and I want, I'm gonna get into this." Because I can tell you, for me, back when I did not used to read a lot compared to now, reading like 20, 30, 40, 50 books a year. It makes such
Right.
a difference, because, and this, because you coach people in this area with mindset on these techniques. Because, I mean, I wouldn't even, I would love to ask you too, what difference do you think it would have made for you, like if you hadn't been a reader, like if you grew up from a young age and you didn't read, you didn't like reading, you weren't into that, like you didn't want to write, because you said you started blogging, and then from blogging then you went to the YouTube. So if you didn't like reading, or writing or any of that stuff, that's wild. Because just the fact that you use that gift and you took that and you created something that other people can tune into and tap into and say, oh wow, these techniques, these tips, these tricks that you talk about on mindset and through your story has inspired me to not just, and that's also inspiring people to want to get their stories out into the world too. Because that's, I think,
Oh
one
yeah.
of the most beautiful things about books. They're amazing. So many different stories, so many different things that we could like take and read and then apply to our life, but also opens up that door to the possibility of, hey, like I have a story inside of me, because we all have that. We all have a story inside of us on something, some topic, something that has really impacted our life. And if you can inspire someone to get that out into the world, I think that's huge. Because, if you can touch just one person, I think that's amazing. Just like impact someone in such a way where they're like, hey, I read your book and this completely shifted my view. This has completely taught
Right.
me a lesson that I had no idea about. I think that's amazing because, we need that kind of stuff. So, I mean, this just brings me back to, another question I want to ask you is, if you could share with me the most powerful tip that you've learned so far to help you master the game of life, what is that tip?
Wow, that's a deep question. The most powerful tip to master the game of life. Man, I could give a lot of tips, but I would
Yeah.
say the number one, yeah, I would say the number one is just learning about investing in yourself from as early an age as possible. I wish I knew about it sooner. So I didn't know what personal development was until I was like 21. That's the first time I heard of it. I'd heard of I always liked the human psychology books in the bookstore, but I didn't know there was a thing called personal development. It's this material that was all about making you a more valuable person. So that's something that I don't have kids, but if and when I do, that's the one of the main things that they're going to know is personal development and investing in themselves, not just in money, but also time, attention, energy, and focus. So just understanding that those things that you put into yourself on the front end are going to pay off on the back end, and that's for people who are moving forward, progressing people who work on their games and create success. They are always investing in themselves. So that'd be the number one tip.
Oh, I love that. And I love how you laid out those areas as well. Not just invest in yourself, but your energy, time, focus, money, all of these aspects. Because, just like you, I wish that I learned about that earlier too. And I wish that we all did. That's I think that's a powerful lesson, to, one day when you have children to teach them that, because that's huge. If like we could learn this, we can go back in time and have this. But I think it's so beautiful, just the journey that we've had and like whatever age we stumbled across this and learned about this and we did it anyway,
Right.
right? We're still out here, we're still doing it, we're still learning, growing, applying this information. But I love that tip because it's so true. Like if you don't invest in you, how can you invest in anyone else? How can you pour
That's right.
into anyone else? Because if you feel empty in yourself, like how are we going to give to others? How are we going to serve? How are we going to contribute if we feel overwhelmed, drained, like we're not enough, we're, sick, tired, all these things, and we're not pouring into ourselves? So I love that tip. I love that so much. Just investing in yourself in all the ways, all the areas that you can think of, and really prioritizing, like what are you doing with your energy and your time? And, what environments are you in? Who do you have around you? Who's in your life? Who are these people supporting you? Are they pouring into you? Or are they, taking the energy out of you? That's so important. So I love that you bring that tip up as like the number one tip that you have learned so far and just how to master this game that we are all in called life. I love that. And
Right.
the last question that I always love to ask everybody. I love to ask this because there's all kinds of different answers, but they're all amazing. So I'd love to ask you, what are you currently doing right now in this moment to master your mental?
What am I doing right now in this moment? Or right now I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
And sharing this philosophy with the world is the biggest thing that I'm in. So taking that work in your game framework and then the frameworks within it. So I have a new book that's talking about one of the frameworks inside of work in your game philosophy. Really, my focus is getting my message out to as many people as possible because I know the message is proven. I know there's value in it, and it's helping change people's lives. So now my responsibility is to make sure people know about it because it can't help them if they don't know that it exists. So that's my focus.
Oh, I love it 100%. And the business is work on your game, correct? Work
Yes,
on your
it's the
game.
name of the
Awesome.
company.
So tell
Right.
the people, where can they get more of you? Where can they find you? Where are you at? How can they learn more about what you are, what you're doing, what you're up to?
Sure. Well, the place I'm most active is probably Instagram. That's where we initially connected. It was on Instagram. So my IG is just my name at Dre Baldwin, one word. I'm on all the other social medias. That's the main place that people can find me is usually through IG, and I'm active on Clubhouse as well a couple times a week. I do have a new book that's out. I give people a free copy if they just cover the shipping. Can I tell people about that, Paris?
Yes, of course. Tell us, what is it?
Okay, so my newest book is called The Third Day, The Decision That Separates the Pros from the Amateurs. I don't know if we'll be on video, but you can see
Oh
it right
yeah.
here. Yeah, so this is my most popular framework. Whenever I give a speech that's titled "Work on Your Game." This is one of the points that I talk about, and everybody remembers the third day. So the third day is about any situation in your life where the newness has worn off, the novelty's gone, and you realize that the thing you signed up for is not all fun and games. There's actual work that needs to be done, and it's a decision that you make. Are you going to show up and do that work, or are you going to kind of halfway do it or not show up at all? It's kind of like when you go back to the gym after a while, you haven't been there. First day, you feel great. The
Mm-hmm.
workout's hard, but you feel great. Second day, you still feel pretty good, still new. By the third day, you're already deciding, you're trying to figure out, do I even want to go to the gym? Do I want to cancel this? Do I want to not go to that boot camp class? By the third day, already, you're realizing that this is some real work that's going to have to be done. And do you show up anyway? The third day doesn't mean 1, 2, 3 in a row. It just means any situation where the newness is gone and you got to decide, are you going to show up all the way? Professionals get paid what they get paid, not because of their talent and the peaks, but because they are consistent and they do it all the time. That's what this book is about. Showing up all the time, giving your best effort, even when you least feel like it. So I give people a free copy of the book. All you do is cover the shipping. Just go to thirddaybook.com. It's just spelled out. Thirddaybook.com. Book's free. Just cover the shipping. I'll send it to you anywhere in the world that you live.
I love that. I love that so much. And you guys, I will link everything in the bio so you can tap that to give Dre a follow. Check out what he is up to and what he's doing because you guys heard the conversation. It was a great conversation. So many tips were shared here that are so powerful in terms of mindset and how to really master this game that we are all in called life. So check it out, do it right now or whenever you can. And whether you guys are listening right now in the morning or nighttime, whatever time it is, I hope that you guys all have a great rest of your day or night. And on that note, I'm going to end it here and say bye to you guys and bye to Dre. Thanks for coming out. Bye.
Thanks, Paris. Happy to be here.